One day, I walked in the door after I got home from class. I was hungry. I set my stuff down, and I grabbed the box of pierogies out of the freezer. I let the pan warm, I let the pierogies defrost, and as I was standing above the stove, I began to think about my own family. Technically, we were Polish. Technically, if my ancestors saw what I was doing, they would be disgusted that I am reheating frozen Mrs. T pierogies without any seasoning. It was at that moment that I realized what I was doing was actually a performance. I've sat in class and I've heard this multiple times about what the definition of performance is, and this certainly started to feel like one. Not just because I was making a cultural food, but because the cultural consciousness embedded within my identity was my audience. What's more, I normally end up making too much food, so I let one of my neighbors and friends, who's also of Eastern European descent, have first dibs on whatever I have left. Yeah, that's Alyssa. She's Czech. But apart from just the cultural conscience, Alyssa also serves as a verifiable point of authenticity as an audience. Correspondingly, if I take the time to make decent pierogies like these, her memory of my performance will serve to show the potential for my future performances in culinary art. Fortunately, that day hasn't come yet. As you can tell, she's equally disappointed by my lack of authenticity. So let's talk about authenticity. So far in class, this has been a bit of a gray area, but from my understanding of authenticity, I feel that it is the measurement of an object or a performance from a verifiable point of the cultural center. The point of reference I imagine is that most authentic pierogies are made by a Polish woman in Krakow that's 70 years old, and I have never met this woman. But from this mental image, I can put effort into mimicking this cultural icon. And that starts with going to local Eastern European stores instead of Publix. Instead of buying pierogies made with cheddar and cheese, it's ingredients from this local store, including mushrooms and cottage cheese, made mostly in Eastern Europe. And normally I'd have a Polish beer, a perła, to go with it, but because it's a classroom video, I'm having a red kvass from Lithuania instead. Now, I'm going to talk about two things. I feel that it's quite impossible to discuss ritual and play if you don't talk about them together. Take cooking, for example. I have learned that what I put inside this pan is purely play. I can add spices, I can add onions, I can add peppers. All these choices are left to me and me alone. However, there's play and ritual, but there are now boundaries to this play. If I use quality ingredients and I follow the steps of making the food as described by previous generations, by definition I will have completed a ritual. However, in that ritual, I can add additional ingredients that do not violate the authenticity of the meal. This is called play within an appropriate play frame. Of course, if I overwhelmingly violate this play frame, I'm going to get a poor reception from the ritual's audience, especially those who are members of the same cultural audience. Another topic we must talk about is art, or aesthetics in general. I'm certainly not saying I'm an artist, at least not in the culinary world. But if I follow the same steps, and I follow the procedures outlined by previous generations of this ritual, if I create pierogies that just don't look nearly as good, even if I follow the recipe, I will have deteriorated the significance of these cultural pierogies that are the product of a ritual. Moreover, this media is now a result of a performance, which means that it's not just going to be judged by me, but it's going to be judged by the entire audience of people I'm serving it to. Previously, I was under the assumption that art is a very strong word. However, after having some discussions in class, I realized that this term is not really a one-size-fits-all subject. Just small stylistic choices, in this case enhancing the cultural feeling of my product, is an example of using aesthetics as a performance choice. Ultimately, I'm not an actor, but that does not mean that our world is not filled every day with similar performances. Being where I am on this course shows me that just little interactions between people and between cultures serve to fit many of the criteria that we have for performance. Even if it's just making pierogies, understanding the terminology and actions of these performances makes me more successful in areas of authenticity, play, ritual, and aesthetics. Still, it might not make me a great cook.
Vážně myslíš, můžeš servovat do lidem? Úplně hovno. To je